Hello, and welcome to episode 14 of the Barndoor restoration. Last episode, I worked on assembling the front of the front frame rails. That's pretty much finished. I have a bit of finishing work to do on them. Not bad. This episode, I started building parts. Now, I planned to have all the parts built for back here, but I had a little issue. I'll get into that in a little bit. But anyway, I decided to build these parts because, well, it would be fun. I enjoy making the parts, buying replacement parts, which you can for these, because these parts are basically the same as later splits. It's hard to get good quality replacement parts. Some are good, some aren't. They usually always, all of them need reworking in some way. And often they're not quite right. There's little things like the angle of this notch. If you look at replacement parts, they're always straight. And there's a good chance that if I got parts, replacement parts for this, that they wouldn't be quite right. They need to be modified. Because even though they fit from later buses, they're not quite the same in a lot of ways. Anyway, I just prefer to do it myself. So the main thing I need to do is have accurate drawings of these parts before I can build them. Now, when I was taking the bus apart, I measured everything up. And a lot of parts were in pretty bad shape, but there's still enough detail where you could get your measurements, and there's enough other parts so they could kind of figure out how far out stuff stuck and different things. So I was able to make accurate drawings. Also, I measured a few things off my 64, which I knew were the same, to get the details. So I measured everything up, drew it up in CAD using sheet metal tools. That way I could unfold it and print a flat pattern. So what I did is I printed a flat pattern at 1:1 scale on multiple sheets out of the printer. Before I printed them, I added alignment lines so that when I went to tape them together, they're really easy to line up. So I printed them out, I then cut them out, and then I used them to cut out my parts. Now, you could trace them. What's really quick and accurate is just use a can of spray paint. So put it down, put some magnets around it, and I just got some cheap fridge magnets, little chrome ones. They work really great. Hold it down, give it a shot of paint, let it dry, and now you have a really good pattern to cut from, and really easy to see. So once marked, rough cut it with the shear, and then use a cutoff disc and the grinder to notch a lot of it. There is one little thing I do is where there's really sharp cuts, I'll run a drill in those spots before I use the grinder or the shear, and that way it gets a nice smooth corner in there. Otherwise you have two cuts coming in and you have to kind of grind it smooth. It's easier if it's just drill a hole first. So between the grinder, the shear, I get it the right size. I then use a sanding disc on the grinder to finish it off a bit, and then a flat file and a round file to make it all nice and clean and smooth, so there's no sharp edges and stuff. And once that's done, where there's holes, I actually put the pattern back on the metal, and I'll use a center punch, one of the spring-loaded ones you push down, they make a snap and mark the steel. So I put this on and I hit any of the center of the holes. This cross member had quite a few holes in it to mark. So I mark all the holes, drill those, then put the pattern back on and mark the bends. And the way I do that, again, line it up, I'll just hit it with the center punch on each end of each bend. And then I'll use a straight edge with a little carbide scribe and scribe the lines in. Trick is to make sure you have the right bends marked on the right side. So any bend marked is for an upward bend. If it's on the other side, it's going to be marked for the upward bend for the brake. The Outriggers are fine because I had a mirror image. Just make sure they're opposites. cross member has to be bent one way, and that one's bent backwards. Uh, Somehow I messed that up. I have a new piece made, so I can bend a new one. This will be the correct one when it's finished. So yeah, the cross member came out really nice, and it's bent backwards. So it's important to pay attention to your bends. Also pay attention to what order you can bend them in. I can't bend both ends up and then bend this piece in my brake because the end bends would hit when you went to bend it. But they're so small, they're very easy to put in after. So that's what I did with those. I'm very happy with how the Outriggers come out. The bends are, the radius is correct. They're all nice and even and straight. I did find a tendency to overbend them, and then I had to kind of pull them apart a bit. It's easier to underbend them because when you're clamping stuff together, it's much easier to just kind of push them together in place and clamp them because you can't pull them apart easily when they're in there, but it's easy to push them together. So I try to underbend them just slightly on the next ones I do. So very happy with the Outriggers. There's one little detail I haven't done. I haven't put the drain hole in. I think an April 54 should have a drain hole there, an 8mm drain hole, but I haven't been able to confirm that. There's not a lot of buses with an original metal in the bottom of them. I think from photos I've seen, it looks like they have them. And also the same with the cross members, front and rear, is I think they have a hole in the middle of them. I believe it's 8mm also, but I think newer buses had a 10mm hole. So I'm waiting to find a confirmation on that before I drill them. And if anybody knows, please comment and let me know. So the Outriggers came out great. The cross member also come out great, except that it's backwards. Yeah, exactly backwards, which is too bad. But no, it's a good practice, I suppose. The trick with these is I could only bend the flanges on one end. Then I did the two sides and then the two deep bends. I ended up the other end having to bend them by hand after on the vise. Now the part I had issues with the top hat, because it's so long, the radius did not come out well in the middle because the brake flexed. And you wouldn't think that much steel would flex, but it takes an amazing amount of strain to keep this perfectly straight when it's bending. So the radius is off a little bit, not enough to show, and probably as close as replacement metal would be. And also there's a steel floor that welds on top of this. It kind of hides this radius anyway. But this one's close enough to use. But I did some modifications to the brake. So hopefully now it'll bend nice and straight the whole length. So when I bend the next one, if it comes out really good, really easy, I'll probably just replace this one, build a new one. So a couple of people in the comments expressed interest in my brake. So the main reason I built this is because, well, I can't afford all these nice fancy tools and build a barn door at the same time. So the only solution is either buy replacement parts or build a brake that I can build them on. So that's why I built it. It's a pretty simple design. It's got a main beam. It's got the bending plate here. That's a 1/2 inch thick by 6 inch wide. The reason I use that design is because I want to be able to bend these deep channels. And that allows me to get up in there to bend it. The top beam is a 2 inch by 6 inch tube, 5/16 wall. I had left over for another project. You wouldn't think you'd be able to bend that, but when I did the top hat, the full length, it actually did flex this in. Now, I did do a modification. I added two 6 inch, 1/4 inch plates out the back, full length. So it triangulated that, so now it can't flex. Well, it can flex, but it can't flex as much as it did before. So now it'll bend the full length nice and sharp. The hinges are typical on the end, but I've added half hinges. There's 4 of them. So you can actually unbolt the end hinge, and this still works. That's good if I have something hanging out the end. Say I only want to bend part of it. When I did the front frame on the right side, I had 2 bends on an angle. I was able to bend one side on one end, one side on the other. These handles that lock it down, they're just simple over center. So once this bolt here passes over the center point, it locks it, so pushing up just can't unlock it. So it's pretty easy to do. You just adjust the tension and for the thickness of metal you want, and snap that down. This bolt adjusts the pivot point back and forth so the blade moves back. So for thicker material, you want it back a bit from the bend. I can also get a slightly bigger radius by moving it back some. There's just a little bit of adjustment you can do there. So overall, I'm quite happy with it. I knew I was going to have to tweak the design a bit. There's a reason why a lot of these brakes that you buy are so huge. It takes so much strength to keep the metal perfectly straight over the length of it. So I guess I could do a bend here. The trick is to make sure I do it the right way. That's the correct way. Let's try to unlock both sides. Now, I'll put my glasses on for this. There we go. Oh, that's not quite strong enough. There we go. There. So, all clamped down. The line is correct. I'll just bend this up. Try not to overbend it. Yeah. There we go. A nice bend. I guess I can do the other side while I'm here. That's close. There we are. So it's a little underbent, but when I go to weld it in, I can easily kind of squeeze it together and clamp it in place. So I think that's about it for this episode. In the next episode, I'm going to finish off these rear frame rails. I want to get everything done to them before I start welding parts on. It makes them easier to flip over and such. The transmission hoop has a lot of dents in the bottom. And the only way to fix those is to actually split the tube, reshape it, and weld it back. There also may be some thin spots in the bottom. It's hard to tell. So I'm going to have to replace a bit of that. There's also a couple holes in the top rail I need to fix. A seam that's split there that I need to open up and re-weld. So that'll be the next episode. I wanted to say I really appreciate the comments. I don't usually respond to comments. Unless they're questions, I will answer the questions. But I do appreciate the comments. So I guess that's it. Thanks for watching.